Please welcome our panellists, Her Excellency Ana Brnabić, Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia. Founder and Executive Chairman of Econet Group, Strive Masiyiwa. Co-founder and Chairman of Infosys, Nandan Nilekani. Co-founder of Grab, Tan Hooi Ling. And our moderator, anchor for Bloomberg Television, Haslinda Amin.
Thank you for joining us. Now more than ever, we're looking towards digital solutions to drive productivity, growth, and create a more inclusive society. For governments, McKinsey estimates that they can unleash $1 trillion of economic value if they can capture the full potential of digitization. And for companies, it's about unlocking value, creating new revenue streams, also serving not just the customers, but also their workers better. The problem is, as we get attached to technology, as we become more dependent on technology, there are challenges like privacy and cybersecurity. So, are the trade-offs justified? Are there ways to mitigate the risks? And I'm really delighted to have the powerhouses in the digital space. Let's start with the Prime Minister. Prime Minister Serbia has been in the forefront. In fact, the UN says that it is one of the 10 countries that have made the biggest stride in digitization. It's been a priority for you since you came to office. How has it been a productive use of the country's money?
It's been amazing journey since basically 2017. We have, we've done a lot of things, introducing coding and programming as mandatory subject in the primary schools, introduced specialized IT classes in the secondary schools, invested a lot of money into infrastructure just for startup innovation companies, building science and technology parks, changing legislation to enable tax incentives for companies investing in research and development, also for employing IT specialists, or bringing foreigners to Serbia to work from Serbia, special incentives for companies that bring our diaspora back to Serbia. And the results were amazing, I think, beyond what we ever expected. I'll tell you just two facts. One is 10 years ago, 2012, our IT export was 375 million, and this year it's going to be over 2.6 billion, and that's just in 10 years. And in 2021, every second new job created in Serbia was in the IT sector. And for me, it's just the beginning, but you could see that, countries that weren't the winners of third industrial revolution could utilize this fourth industrial revolution, or what might be the fifth industrial revolution, with biotechnology to really excel and change the future for their citizens.
Just the beginning for Serbia, also just the beginning for India. I mean, Nandan, you spearheaded pretty much the other program, which is the digital biometric ID system. Now more than 1 billion people have access to it. How has it been a game changer for India?
Well, I think India is building actually a very, very good digital economy, and Aadhaar, of course, the project that I led. Today, 1.3 billion people have a digital ID, and they use it 50 million times a day to authenticate themselves for something or the other. You can use that to do a KYC or know your customer and get a mobile connection or a bank account in 2 minutes and so on. And then another thing which we did subsequently with NPCI did was to build a real-time interoperable payment system called UPI that last month did 7.3 billion transactions, over $1 trillion a year of transactions, and about 260 million people use that payment platform. And now we're looking at data empowerment, which allows people to use their own data. For example, small businesses can use their digital footprint to get credit. And then the latest thing is something called ONDC, which is the Open Network for Digital Commerce, which essentially allows everyone to participate in e-commerce as a buyer, a supplier, or as a logistics player. So fundamentally, it's a larger plan to create a digital economy which is equitable and which is inclusive, and which allows everyone to improve their lives with their digital footprints.
Just to put it out there, it was 13 years in the making.
That's right. I joined the Aadhaar project in the government in 2009, and I worked in the government for 5 years, and when I left, there were about 600 million people with ID, but then Prime Minister Modi has taken it forward. He's very big on digital technology, and I think so now we are really in a very good spot.
Strive, you're the man who said that you want to take Africa's digital economy to the fast lane. How do you plan to do that? What's the end goal?
Well, you know, a great idea always comes at the same time all over the world. So Africa is not outside what's going on in, elsewhere in terms of digital infrastructure. My business, for instance, we've been building fiber optic networks, data centers. We've built over 100,000 kilometers of fiber across Africa, north, south. Probably the only continent where a single company has done that. I don't think anyone did it in Europe or Asia or Latin America. Well, we did it in Africa. We built a fiber network that goes from Cape Town to Cairo, across the Sahara, to West Africa, through the Congo rainforest. Excuse me. We've been building data centers. And our industry from which I come from, you know, more than 800 million people in Africa have a mobile phone. 400 million of those are smartphones. We know we were the pioneers in mobile money, and we're beginning to transform that into a more sophisticated infrastructure. So Africa is also on this path, and we're excited.
Speaking of excitement, of course, for Grab, it is a fantastic place to be. You've gone from being a ride-hailing app to a super app. What was the thinking behind there?
Before I go there, can I just say that it's awesome to be the smallest fry on the stage, so thank you so much for enabling me to be here. But I think the thinking behind the evolution that we've had has always been similar to the vision that we started a company with, which is to really create, via technology, economic empowerment for this region that we live and call home. And the idea first started as a taxi-hailing app, but very soon we realized similar principles around creating a scalable platform could be used for much more than that. During COVID, food deliveries became the thing that was our number one priority because we had hundreds and thousands of driver partners that were relying on us that suddenly had no income opportunities. We saw thousands and thousands of merchants throughout the region also struggling to make a living. So the reason why that underlying transition from ride-hailing to super app happened is because we're ultimately trying to create income opportunities via technology, which I think is what we all share here. And we believe as long as Southeast Asia succeeds, Grab succeeds. And for us right now going forward, we're very, very focused on a group of users that we call the everyday entrepreneurs, which is a combination of MSMEs, micro, small, medium entrepreneurs, which in this region is critical because it represents like 97% of all businesses here. So it's a key economic driver and also employer for the region. And secondly, this new industry that we all now call the gig industry, which we also consider as entrepreneurs because they own their own P&Ls and they own their own business and time. Yeah. So for us, what we're trying to do is take the silver linings from COVID. COVID came with a lot of downsides. It was not a great period, but it came with one silver lining where digitalization accelerated tremendously. And so what we are trying to do right now is make sure we don't lose the momentum from all that value that has been created, while also ensuring that this new value is distributed as broadly and sustainably as possible, because inequality in this current environment is now becoming very, very real. So with tooling, technology, that's what we're hoping to do.
We always talk about how we want to use technology to level the playing field, to create a more inclusive society. Truth of the matter is that there are always those marginalized. There's always the risk that inequality will persist or even deepen as a result of technology. Prime Minister, how are you addressing that issue, ensuring that there's a level playing field, everybody is included?
Well, firstly, I think obviously the internet access is a number one thing, and if you think about the 21st century, I think that having internet access has really become like one of those basic human rights, and I don't think that I'm in any way exaggerating this. It has been. I mean, if you look at, for example, one of my key priorities was introducing e-government. So, I didn't see any point in living in the 21st century and still having to physically go and wait at some counter to do something, and pick up papers from one office to the next to bring them to the government to get another paper, So paperless government, e-government was a way for me to influence the efficiency of the government, transparency, also fight corruption. But if you introduce e-government, then you have to make possible for all of the citizens to have access to that e-government. And that is why I think, as Thrive said, I think that is amazing. I think that everyone should have internet access in the 21st century and that we should all invest into it. Our goal is that by 2025, 100% of population in Serbia has access to broadband. And then the next thing, so that no one is left behind, is certainly education. And I think the computers are becoming less and less expensive. I think it will be down to the state to buy a computer to each pupil in schools. So we don't have textbooks. We have digital textbooks. We pay for licenses for those textbooks. I think these are some of the basic things that we need to do as governments, and then obviously the private sector will also take it forward.
As entrepreneurs, like three of our speakers here, how are you looking at the issue, Strive?
Well, it's all in the numbers if you think about it. I said in this forum in 2018, if I remember right, when I came into the mobile industry in 1994, 0.075% of the African people had a mobile phone, had ever heard a telephone ringing. Today, I used to say 75%. But actually, the number of mobile phones in Africa today now exceeds 100% of the population. Okay, so if that's not inclusion, I don't know what is. 5 years ago, less than 2% of the African population had a bank account. Today, more than 250 million people have bank accounts because of digital investment by the private sector, by entrepreneurs. So that's how we get inclusion. It requires us as entrepreneurs to develop solutions that bring the masses of the people into play. Many people have looked at Africa and said, well, how can people who live on less than $2 a day be a market? Well, they are. They are a market. And they will be the world's largest market at the turn of this century. 40% of the world's population will be Africans. Mm. So we're waiting for you. If you're in business, you need to be in Africa because you can't miss 40% of the world's population.
And you heard it first at the New Economy Forum.
So you heard it first here.
Ling?
Yeah, so this concept of providing access and leveraging infrastructure from the amazing governments that we work with, critical for us. And let me try and use this, use a tangible example for us on how we're trying to empower, again, MSMEs and everyday entrepreneurs, right? The concept I think about is providing a digital business in a box for them. Because if you're a mom and pop star owner, you don't really know how to create a website, to go start getting sales. You don't really have any idea whether you should be hiring drivers to be your distribution network? How do you think about SEO and ads and marketing to create a digital footprint that you can create, business and drive revenue from, right? This is not something that they are skilled at, know how to do, or even want to do at certain points in time. But thanks to, again, COVID, many of them actually realized they had to, and when they tried, it was easy. And that's because they had services like Grab that they could lean on to get that digital business in a box service. And one of the stories I'm thinking about right now, I can literally see her store in my head because I'm a visual thinker, is Bu Siska. She's vegetable store owner in a wet market in Jakarta. So think about this really small store, somewhere in a wet market, multiple floors, like the floors are kind of wet. You go there if you live nearby. It's not a tourist attraction, but it's kind of what enables her to put money into food and her kids through school. During COVID, everybody, likewise globally, was struggling to figure out how to survive without anybody being able to go in and drive foot traffic and revenue for them. So she signed up for Grab. Before this, had no need to, no inkling to, and actually thought it was potentially scary. Why? The digital business. But as part of that, she now tells that story with such pride because even post travel restrictions, releasing, everybody going back to normal work, and folks actually going back to the markets to buy food, her Grab online transactions now represent 90% of all of her revenue.
Wow.
And just to illustrate what this is a wet market store owner. Her Grab online revenues represent $15,000 US dollars per month of revenue she never had access to before. So you can imagine why whenever she sees Anthony and I, she goes crazy happy. And this, to be honest, makes us crazy happy as well, because we've heard so many of these stories that truly is the reason why we are doing what we're doing, right? Because there's so many more Bu Siskas in the region globally that we think all they need is the right access to the right tools, after which they will actually learn what to do.
New growth model, new economic model, and you say, right, Nandan, that the biometric system allows for that to happen.
Yes, I think we need to think of this at several levels. Obviously, at one level, connectivity is very important, and everybody must have access to a mobile phone, a smartphone, and cheap data. So that's one thing, and people like Strive, and in India, people like Jio and Airtel have done that. So that's one part of it. The other is financial access. Everybody must have a bank account. In India, in the last few years, 700 million new people have had bank accounts, all done through this infrastructure. A third thing is identity, having a digital identity which they can take with them anywhere. So if you have identity, a phone, and you have a bank account, then you have the three basic instruments to move forward in life. Now, when you start doing these transactions, you generate digital footprints, digital exhaust. Now, if there's a way you can leverage that to get access to services, then you have created an inclusive development model. So you can have this small vendor who does transactions. The transactions create digital access. That creates data which can then be used to parlay it for a loan, what's called as information collateral. So that's one part. The other thing is that I think all the countries in the region have to go from informal to formal economy. So what this digital economy is doing is accelerating the process of formalization. So people who are outside this system come into this system. Now, historically, people haven't come into the system because they're worried about taxes and so on. But if coming into the system gets you access to services like better credit, then you will join the system. So we are seeing formalization. And once you have formalization, then the state has better tax returns, tax income, which then can pay for public services. So there's a whole sort of theme here on inclusion, driving economic growth, driving formalization, driving better state finances. And I think that's the journey that countries will have to make.
Is that the journey that Serbia is taking?
Absolutely. I'll tell you another area where I think globally digital will play even bigger and more important role, and that's agriculture. I mean, I think a lot of countries tend to forget that because of, different things, and climate change being one of the most important ones. the digital agriculture is really going to be the only sustainable solution and for efficient and sustainable agriculture. So everything that has to do with smartphones. I mean, I see farmers in Serbia using smartphones more and more to look at their crops. They can get, anytime day or night, a satellite vision of their crops. They can see if something's wrong. They get fed information on what's wrong and how to remedy it. And we will have to do it more and more because, I mean, at the end of the day, because of the climate change, you won't be able to harvest the same things that your grandparents did. And I think, there is so much potential in new growth models in each and every sector that really, I mean, the job of the government is to help the private sector to realize this and then create conditions for this to be successful, basically.
Strive?
Absolutely. I'm always excited about agriculture. I always say if I came back again at 25, I'll have a shot at farming. And it's the digitization side. I'll give you an example. One of our companies developed after my visit to Grab. So I came here in 2018, and I met Tony here. And after doing our panel together, I visited you guys. And I thought about this Grab platform. Went back and I told my guys, we need to look at this. But instead of doing urban transport, we developed a similar platform for tractors. Because there aren't enough tractors in Africa. So people now just call up a tractor.
It's amazing.
So you can take these platforms, these digital platforms, the sort of things that's going on in agriculture. And what's exciting is people like Google. I had a presentation the other day from a team at Google doing extraordinary work in terms of agriculture, particularly now with the climate change. We need smart solutions around water, around crop challenges for the crops themselves, soils, and so forth. So we're only just getting started, because remember, the global south is where the majority of the people live,
So Ling?
and we are in the global south.
Just to add one sentence, I mean, if you think about modern, efficient, sustainable agriculture, it has become, all of it has become about robots taking earth samples, soil samples, robots, satellites, smartphones, and big data analytics, so AI. It's unbelievable. I'm happy to say that in Serbia we have European Center of Excellence for Digital Agriculture. It's called Biosense Institute. So that's how I know all of these things. But it really is. I mean, if you look at Africa, the potential that digital agriculture has to address the future challenges in terms of food supply, hunger. With digital agriculture, I'm sure that Africa could feed the whole world.
The next level of innovation at Grab, you think?
In terms of identity, agriculture, no, I think there are much smarter people in the panel to solve it. I think for us, it's actually Strive gave a fantastic illustration, which is ultimately the platform and technology capabilities that we're building can be used and expanded into many different use cases. And once you build a core set of capabilities, whether it's KYC or loan origination capabilities using new information that previously was not available because it was in the informal economy, you can actually start to create really net new business models. And that's what we've been doing with microfinancing, micro-insurance, right? Really, again, similarly replicating everything that has already been shared, finding new ways to distribute and create wealth for previously underserved segments. And I know a lot is being talked about in the news and media about, Web3 or metaverse and whatnot. To me, I think those technologies are really, really cool. But for us, what really matters more is what is the biggest problem that we, 600 plus million folks in Southeast Asia are currently facing? And what is the most relevant technology to solve that problem? And at this point in time, it's actually still very much smartphones, AI, ML, accessibility, upskilling, finding ways to make UI and UX easy to understand for a group of individuals that did not get the same kind of education that software developers did. Like, all of these are very real, high-value opportunities that actually very accessible, readily information and technologies haven't yet fully solved. And till it's solved, we'll continue trudging down that path.
We talk a lot about putting everything, all the services on digital. But there are risks. If you take a look at how, when companies pulled out of Russia, the common people couldn't access the banks, they couldn't use their cards to travel on the transportation system. How are you looking at those risks, and how do you mitigate those risks? Nandan?
No, I think there are different kinds of risks. I think one risk is privacy risk, because as more and more data of yours goes online, then somebody's probably figuring out what you do. So there's a privacy risk, which we find even with social media apps or whatever. So that's one risk. The second is the whole cybersecurity challenge, and with cybersecurity becoming an instrument of global warfare in some sense, you have to worry about where these attacks will come from. And the third is the geopolitical angle, which is if technology itself is going to be weaponized, then countries are going to say, I can't afford to use some other technology, I'll build my own. So I think there are different kinds of things happening, and we have to deal with that. But that still does not take away from the fact that we have to have the right digital economy or society to make this work. And I just want to add that, to give you a scale of, I think, in India in startups, in 2016, India had 1,000 startups. Now we have 90,000 startups. So that's a massive increase. And they're all solving all the problems that we're talking about. So I think the best thing is that you need to have an overall strategy and architecture. The government has to put in digital rails, which everybody can use, and connectivity, and then you have to allow innovation to happen on top of that. If you get this mixture right, then you can build a very advanced digital economy.
Strive?
No, I couldn't agree more. At the end of the day, speaking of Africa, we are still 55 independent sovereign nations. We are not a country. We do happen to coordinate better as countries than everybody else, but which is nice. When we call an African Union meeting, everybody pitches up. So I guess we could share a few stories. But when it comes to privacy, we as entrepreneurs play by the rules of the country. African countries, when Nelson Mandela came out of prison in 91, if I remember correctly, there were only 7 African countries that held regular elections. For the last 15 years, less than 7 African countries don't hold regular elections. In just the next 12 months, at least 600 million Africans will vote. So we are a massive democracy. So we have to accept that in each country, the will of the people and their legislators is what governs us. So, and I don't think these things are mutually exclusive at all. It's not an either or. So we build, countries demand data residency, so we build data centers for them. They demand total privacy for their nationals, we do that. We're entrepreneurs, we play by the rules of the country.
Ling?
Building on top of what Strive mentioned, actually, I want to reflect a change that I've seen in the last few years in the relationship between private and public entities, government regulators, and let's say technology platforms like ours, that I personally think has been extremely positive, which is the willingness to actually, work as one team and figure out the broader concept of what should privacy regulations be, cybersecurity, whatever regulations it is. I've been sensing a much stronger willingness to actually have open conversation before final decisions are made. Because, and that to me is tremendous, because all of us have blind spots. And we've also been doing this very tangibly, for example, let's say, with so many different sandboxes right now, with different central banks like MAS and financial institutions like us as well, where that concept and mental model that we know we need to experiment, we need to learn, iterate, fail together, is actually a very refreshing one that I think, as long as we continue doing, will be fantastic for every citizen that we serve. And actually, let me give you an example, another one during COVID, because all of our stories recently are from the COVID period, right? Where also the government in Indonesia was trying to figure out how they could effectively and scalably distribute COVID-related funds for the segment that was most impacted by the lockdowns, right? They're trying to distribute training, upskilling funds. And how do you do so? By making sure you actually give it to the people who deserve it and you want to target, and doing it without having to get lots and lots of people to go into brick and mortar banks, government agencies, and become, COVID super spreader events. Well, you leverage technology. And in that situation, they realized that we already had access to the majority of the user base that they wanted to touch. And via working together, we've actually now upskilled more than 14 million Indonesians and distributed funds to that targeted group. And we know that the money reached the hands of the individuals that we wanted because of digital identity, because of these new platforms that now enable us to reach out to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 citizens as easily as we could in capital cities.
Before I get the perspective from the Prime Minister, of course, you can submit your questions if you want your questions posed to any of our speakers. Just send it to us online, of course. Prime Minister, your thoughts on cybersecurity and privacy, especially, amid views that there could be an overreach of government using data in the way that it wants to?
Well, I have to say that I thought long and hard about this, because it was one of the biggest criticisms of e-government and doing everything electronically and having, all of the citizens' data, analyzing that data the way you see not fit but needed to provide hopefully better services to your citizens. And I'll tell you, at the end of the day, I think that nowadays citizens' data are certainly better protected than before. I mean, at least now, when you have all of your citizens' data electronically kept in some, state-of-the-art data center that we have built, for example, in Serbia for those purposes, it's all transparent. And, as the Prime Minister or anyone else in the government or whoever can't really just access mine data, your data, if there is a trail of that. So that data is protected. Whereas before, when it was in a paper form, in some municipality, in some office, anyone could come, look at it, copy it, use it, misuse it, and you wouldn't even know who did it. I mean, it was impossible to figure out who did it. So I think that today, the privacy is much, much better protected. And I think especially because, it is so closely, there is such a close oversight of it. People really wouldn't dare to misuse the data in that respect. Before, it wasn't an issue, and you would just assume that, because it's in a paper form in some government office or local government office, it was safe. it wasn't. So I think in that respect we are much, much better off today than where we used to be 10 or 20 years ago.
Did you want to add something, Strive?
No.
We have 2 minutes to go, so I just wanted the views on the final question from all the speakers.
I'm smart enough never to go after a prime minister.
You can disagree if you want, Strive. Your chance.
You should live in Serbia.
You know, as we look towards the future, that digital economy, what excites you the most? If you take a longer-term perspective, right, 5, 10 years down the road, what excites you the most? Ling, we'll go down the line.
No, I think the fact that more and more folks are actually looking to solve real problems with technology and really trying to solve this problem of inequality, as this panel actually has reflected, to me is very, very encouraging. And as long as we all keep working hard and don't ban each other from going to each other's countries, backstage jokes here, I think there's a lot to be excited about in the future.
I think we have an opportunity to create a new model of growth which is equitable, which is digital enabled, and where everybody it's inclusive and allows everyone to carve out their own space and leverage their own abilities to the best of what they can do. And I think we are not far away from achieving that.
So for India, when's that going to be?
In the next decade.
Okay. Strive?
Look, most exciting thing is I look at what happened in China 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And now I look at what's happening in India. And I say, Africa, here we come. All the fundamentals of China 20 years ago, Africa has today. Just don't forget that. We're already 2.5 trillion in our economy. Pre-COVID, we were running 5% per annum. We are coming. So, see you in Africa.
Prime Minister.
I think, yes, going forward, I think for Serbia, the two next big things is, utilizing artificial intelligence for further growth of our economy, as well as to provide better services to our citizens, and biotechnology, because I think, I would love to see us going much faster towards personalized medicine, because I think, when you're a prime minister, you look at your budget, you look at the money you spend on the healthcare, and you still look at so many people that can't access the cutting-edge medicine to save their lives or their children's lives, and investing in biotechnology to resolve that problem and heartache of your people, and you can utilize technology for that, is a big challenge. I think it has so many big gains to be won by all of us.
Prime Minister Brnabić, Strive, Nandan, Ling, thank you so much for being so insightful and so candid today. Thank you for joining us.